So not all of you may know that I have just begun this role as transition minister with Westmoreland for about a year to help during a period of transition and discernment. And in a few conversations and emails as I was considering this role, the goal of transforming Westmoreland was mentioned. And I found that to be a little daunting. I wasn't sure that was part of this role or the part I wanted. But I kept thinking about it. And soon I was reminded of a perspective on transformation that took me from being cautious to being excited. Transformation is not something you can do. Transformation must be done to you. Transformation is not something you can do or we can do. Transformation must be done to us. Paul knew a little bit about transformation being done to him. We find him today on a mission that includes breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, wanting to bring any who belong to the way of Jesus bound to Jerusalem. I'd say that qualifies as focused and task-oriented. And then suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice, and he was rendered sightless for 3 days. Safe to say his plans were altered a little bit. He was transformed in spite of those plans. N.T. Wright is a well-known theologian on Paul. And here's what Wright says about this. He says that Paul was deeply committed to prayer and was probably meditating in a chariot when Jesus appeared. Paul was in a posture to receive spiritually, even if not so open to changing his plans. When Jesus appears to Paul in this way, Wright says that all his life is fulfilled and shattered at the same time. Fulfilled and shattered at the same time. Wright reminds us that this was a time in history where people more easily accepted that heaven and earth were meant to overlap, that they were made for each other. But as centuries passed, that changed. In our modern world, many of us don't really expect these worlds to interact. Is that because we don't believe they really do? Or is it because we know that if it happens, it might transform us radically? I'm going to be very honest with you. I often find ways, both conscious and unconscious, to hide from God. I believe enough in the power of God to break through to me to avoid what that might lead to. I'm not so sure I want to have my precious plans wrecked or lose my sight. But that's what can happen. Wright says that this transformation required Paul to rethink from the ground up everything he had ever believed in. From his own identity to his understanding of who God really was. Up until then, Paul was okay with transforming the world based on what he thought he knew of God, but he couldn't define and control who God really is. How do we, simple people with normal lives, regard transformation? How do we affirm the mystical potential of God to break through to us? In many shamanic societies, if you came to a medicine person complaining of being disheartened, dispirited, or depressed, they would ask you one of 4 questions. When did you stop dancing? When did you stop singing? When did you stop being enchanted by stories? When did you stop being comforted by the sweet territory of silence? Now, I'm not sure one has to be dispirited for those questions to apply, but I do know where many of you are right now in these weeks. And I know these states happen in life. So let's look at each question in terms of this community. Dancing. I honestly have not seen many of you dance. But I bet some of you can turn it loose. I mean, have we ever done liturgical dance as part of worship? Any volunteers today? Want to give it a try? Maybe we'll come back to that. Oh, well. All right, stay tuned. Stay tuned, we may deviate here. Silence. Some of you just shifted and anxiety levels spiked. Maybe we'll ease into that slowly over the year. Maybe I'll give lots of advance notice. But maybe we should just try maybe just like 10 minutes now. Singing. If there is one thing we do well, it is music and singing, right? And if you were here last week and not moved, totally moved by the musical program, then you must have been working on the longest, most complicated, most consuming grocery list of your life. Music might be the most familiar way that many of you approach transcendence. Do you agree with that? And in terms of worship and music, I love what UCC minister Reverend Dr. Barbara Holmes says. She says, one of the reasons that the Black church has focused so much on music and exhortation is that in order to survive or to remain Christian, we had to look beyond the tenets of Christianity to the mystical. We had to be able to transcend. And the transcendence comes when you are singing a song that reaches a place that words can't reach. She goes on to say, I'm not very interested in articulate sermons. A small church I attended started singing the song, God Did It Suddenly, and suddenly there was this moment where everything changed. There's this understanding that God can enter in. No matter how devious the Christian tenets have become, God can change everything suddenly. And lastly, of the four questions, stories. Personal and communal, short and long, embellished and entertaining. Stories shared in relationship are different from history. Stories are different from history. Our stories are more about how we understand ourselves and others along the journey. They help create ways forward. They help us connect. When we are the text, instead of pages or screens, it's different. Taking notes with our hearts and our souls, not our pens or our keyboards, is more impactful. It opens us to possibility. This church, Westmoreland, has over 150 years of documented history. And many of you know the factual details of the last decades. But I want you to be curious about how your story and the story of others interact with that. What grabs you? Where do you converge intimately with those events? Some of you experienced a taste of that at the recent church retreat that we had about a month ago. Together, we told the story of the Westmoreland Service Corps. Some of you learned more about the program and the people. Some of you became more known in the telling of the story and your story. The way that the story was invited and the space we were in gave energy. It gave ideas. It affirmed us. It was a good model for thinking about who we are now and who we want to become. So I want more stories. Stories that make us curious. I want you to dwell on how someone got their name or where they grew up or their experiences with church or how God has transformed them. To start meetings like that. To have church meeting agendas wrecked by storytelling. Totally wrecked. And my goal is to start most conversations with you like that, by inviting a story of your choosing and see where that takes us. So don't let me get carried away with productivity and making church better before we've done that. Don't let us avoid a chance to welcome God in fun ways. Might even be transformative. Story might be the best thing we can do to open a transformation. And remember, we can't set an agenda for that transformation. But we might get in a place and get in some rhythms where God can better work with us. Whether you think Jesus was a shaman or not, that's a whole other sermon or a class or something. He understood that the Spirit of God exists within our beings, and that accessing that requires openness to renewal by changing our perceptions of who we think we are and the way we look at the world, even the way we understand what we think we know of God. And you know what? Jesus told a lot of stories about a lot of important things to try to get through to people. So as I said, months ago, I was questioning the role of transformation in this year of transition. But I have been reminded that church really is not church. And relationship with God really is not at its best if we aren't always open to transformation. If we can't always trust that that potential is there, if we are going deeper in community and relationship. We just have to know our role and not limit our expectations. Transformation is not something you can do. Transformation must be done to you. Paul was transformed while extremely focused on a different way of being and doing. Just think how God might transform us if we actually welcome transformation. Now that would be a fun story to tell. Amen.